A long time ago on the mythical island of Okoto, all lived in harmony. It was a place of wonders and beautiful landscapes. From the island's elemental forces, two brothers known as the Mask Makers created masks of power. But the one brother looked upon these masks and said, "Yo man, that isn't purist. I ain't interested in that on my mark." And then the other brother said, "Come on, Akimu, they look so cool." And then a great debate started and continued on this episode of the Bionicle Inspiration Series. Hello and welcome. So yes, this is the second episode on using custom masks or pieces, painting parts, or making 3D printed pieces. Now obviously there is a bit of debate on this. Some people go, "Ooh, I prefer to be purist. I prefer to use the pieces that Lego has made. I don't like using any sort of pieces that, are third-party products or things that are not technically Lego." And then there's the other people who go, "No, I'm okay with using a little bit of some third-party products here. Let's see what we can do." So today we're going to take a look at using some custom painting, 3D printing masks, all that sort of stuff. Not just masks, any kind of piece. And just see what we can learn. Maybe there's something interesting, and maybe you can take a look at some really nice examples of doing that, and maybe you can try some stuff out. That said, nothing wrong with not doing it, nothing wrong with doing it as well. It's totally up to you. So if that's something that you're interested in doing, go you. And that's if that's something you're not interested in doing, go you. We're just gonna have a look and see what we learn. So let's kick off the episode with a mock that will get all the sweaty fanboys excited. It's Toa Helryx. Now, for those of you who are like, who is Toa Helryx? It's actually a canon character. However, she never appeared as a set, sadly. However, let me give you a quick rundown in case you are interested and don't know. She was the first Toa of Water, as well as the first Toa ever created. She formed the Order of Matanui and became its leader. She's actually quite a prominent character in some of the other Bionicle lore. So, of course, if you're interested, head on over to Biosector or the old Bionicle wiki and give yourself a read, because she's a cool character. So this is a interpretation of Toa Helryx in Lego form, because we actually don't have any official images of her or any sort of contests that ended up making her. There is nothing to represent her, and certainly I think this is a very good representation of what she probably looked like. So let's immediately get into the custom aspect of this mock, which is the mask. So that mask is a 3D printed mask. Now, I said this in the last episode, I'll say it again. Check the links in the description, because I will post a few places where you can actually buy some 3D printed masks. And not just masks, you can buy all sorts of things like 3D printed weapons or weird cool pieces, or those pieces that you've always wanted and now someone has 3D printed and you can obtain them. So that's really cool, Certain pieces or certain masks you've always wanted, now you can have. And that's also something that's interesting as well, is on the Bionicle Wiki or Biosector, either one, it's essentially the same thing at the end of the day, you can find certain articles or certain Toa and things like that, and they reference specific masks that they actually had. And sometimes we actually genuinely don't have that mask. It was never a mask that was officially made into a piece. Now, sometimes there are masks that exist, like, say, Hydraxon's mask, or even some Hero Factory masks for that matter, and you could just sort of say, like, okay, well, maybe this mask can be that equivalent, or I'm going to give this mask this specific power and say that it works this way. But that's something that's really cool about a lot of these 3D printed masks, is a lot of them are actually specifically designed to look like some of these masks. Some of them have descriptions, some of them actually had art that was drawn for them in comics and things like that. And so now these are sort of representations of that art or the concept put into a sort of three-dimensional form. So that's a really cool idea. If you're sort of super deep into the lore, you can go and buy these masks, and now you actually have that mask. And so if you're building that character like this is, you can of course be super, super accurate. And that's really cool if you're a sort of canon junkie. That said as well, if you're super, super good with a 3D printer, you could of course just make your own mask designs. Something that's really cool about this mask is it has that sort of fin effect, almost kind of fish-like, it looks underwatery, it looks water-like. And that's really cool because it very much fits the overall vibe and overall theme of the mock. So maybe if you're designing a custom 3D mask, do some stuff like that. Look into specific aspects of the element. Maybe if you're building a Toa of lava, you would have some sort of magma coursing through the mask. I don't know how you do that with a 3D printer, but get creative. You never know what you might be able to come up with. Or maybe like icicles pouring off of an ice mask, something cool like that. So yeah, kind of look into various different aspects of the element that the Toa will be, and maybe design your mask around that. And that said, you can of course do that with the MOC as a whole. It doesn't have to be designing a specific custom part. You could easily find pieces that look fin-like and put that on a water MOC, or pieces that look icicle-like and put them on an ice MOC, something like that. That's totally easy and totally possible. Speaking of taking inspiration from aspects of an element, the weapon on this MOC, well, actually, let me just quickly finish up on the mask here before I get to that. Suspense! What am I going to talk about with the staff? You'll have to find out in a few seconds. One thing I just wanted to say about this, the only custom part on this is the mask. Everything else, to my knowledge, unless, like the torso has some weird, crazy stuff going on, everything else about this is entirely purist. It's just the one piece. And that's really cool, Maybe you can kind of bend your rules slightly in that factor, Maybe you just want to have one custom part on a MOC. You don't have to have all of it be primarily custom. Who knows? Anyway, now I'll get to the stuff. So what I was going to say here is it very much resembles a sort of underwater naval mine. I think it's very, very clever. That's taking a more sort of, not necessarily obscure, but an obscure aspect of an underwater theme and turning it into the weapon of some kind. So there's nothing wrong with actually really seriously researching into a specific element, and it may not even be a quality of that element, or it can be something like this, something that appears underwater, like a naval mine, which obviously is man-made and placed there, but then again, a weapon is man-made. So I think that's a very cool sort of, very subtle, nice link to water. I think that's very, very clever and very well done. Very nicely designed weapon. It's awesome. There's a lot to love about this MOC. Very, very nicely done, King Marshy. Let's move on to the next MOC, which is by Toa Guyver. Toa Guyver. And this MOC is, of course, called Toa Guyver. I believe it is his self-MOC. So, let's talk about the custom parts on this. Now, obviously, this one has a lot more sort of heavy customization on it. I'm about to sneeze. God bless me. So, obviously, this MOC has a lot more heavy customization on it. In terms of, if you sort of look around on the MOC, you can see the mask, a couple armor pieces on the arms, the torso there, and the upper and lower legs have some painted pieces. There's a really cool effect on these because they've kind of been weathered and painted to be a little bit sort of more of a darker silver to them. They look really awesome. They actually look a bit more sort of like medieval armor in sort of texture and color. It's awesome. It's very, very cool. And that's something I really like about it. Painting a piece, sometimes people just get a spray can or they get a Sharpie or whatever, and they just change the color of the piece, something like that. But what's to stop you from actually being super artistic with it and weathering some armor pieces, or, really seriously going into sort of hyper detail with stuff, like, adding in a secondary color onto the mask, or, accenting something, and, kind of like with your cosplays or with your art in general, with painting and things like that. If you're good with that sort of stuff, or someone who is good with that, some people who maybe paint Warhammer or do some miniature painting and stuff like that, maybe have a little chat to them and sort of see what kind of detail and awesomeness you can get with painting pieces. Now, we obviously touched upon this in the last custom painting episode. There are, of course, people who you can pay to do that with masks, like Moldot masks and things like that. Be sure to check the links in the description for those sorts of places. I covered them more in the last episode, so I won't really touch upon them this time. But that's certainly one avenue to look at too. If you are terrible at that, there are places you can look into to get that sort of stuff done. But I think that's really clever, to sort of go a little bit more in depth with your painting and not just be sort of one layer with it, be kind of multi-layered in that sense. And something else that I like about this, we talked about it before on Helryx. We were saying that the mask is the only custom part, whereas this, there's a lot more custom pieces on it. But he's just painted everything. It's not sort of, like I cut an axle to do this, or, I tweaked this part to get this and all that sort of stuff. It's weathering pieces to make a desired effect. And, some of these pieces don't appear in a sort of silver-like color, so he's able to get some more unique stuff that he otherwise probably couldn't have, and that's awesome. Also cool to see some asymmetry there. Just noticed that with the upper arms there. Very nice, very clever. But yeah, I think that's cool. You can build a very non-custom, purist frame, and then add some armor pieces on it, but those armor pieces are the specific things that you've painted, and it's just a nice way to sort of add a little extra something to a MOC. That's really cool. Speaking of something else that I think is really cool, there's a very clever arm design here, using those Glatorian heads there as the sort of socket connection from the lower arm into the upper arm. That's very, very clever. Very nice way, too, to get some of that trans orange in there, because as you can kind of see throughout a lot of this MOC, there's a bunch of trans orange throughout it, and there's also some flame pieces and things like that, so it's a kind of nice way to sort of represent the element of this MOC. Obviously, he's sort of a bit of a Toa of fire to some degree. I think that's very clever. It's a very nice way to show that off. Nicely done. And so that's about it from Mr. Toa Guyver. Thank you, good sir. Let's move on to the next MOC, which is by Daniel Brickson and is Deadpool. Now again, only a little bit of painting on this one, and I think that's pretty cool because, and sometimes you have this with minifigures. Like, for example, at the moment, I'm building a Rebels MOC obviously from Star Wars Rebels. Probably by the time this episode comes out, it would have already been posted, so there you go. But one thing that I'm doing is I have to make a few custom minifigures for it, because the episode that I'm building from, those characters sadly never got minifigures. And the interesting thing is, some of them I'm like, oh, well, this is quite easy. I can make every single part of them, but the head, that I can't do, because there's no head design that really resembles that. And it's annoying because you have an entirely finished minifigure that looks exactly like the character, it's all purist and everything, but you just can't make one specific part. And you go, if only there was a piece that looks slightly more like that, or I guess I have to go buy a custom one now. And so that's what I'm saying with a MOC. Maybe there's something you want to build, but you just don't know how to do one specific aspect. And you're like, geez, what can I do? Well, maybe that one specific aspect, maybe the only avenue you can pick is a custom thing. You know, for example, painting the howl like this to add that sort of the kind of black highlight around the eyes there is a great way to make a Deadpool-looking mask. But that would have been kind of a bit more difficult to have done without having to, resort to something custom. Maybe you could have done a brick-built head or whatever, but, that's personal preference. If you want to do that, of course you can. There's always another solution, but if you're super stumped, maybe the option is to go custom. That said, I'm not saying to, go custom if you're like, but Ben, I refuse. I am a purist by heart. I will never go custom. But that's okay. You don't have to. But maybe that's a solution. And if not, keep trying. Eventually you'll find the solution that you need. But I just think that's an interesting way to kind of look at something. Maybe there's one specific aspect you might have to go custom for, or you might have a little bit more trouble with. But don't let that be something to discourage you from actually starting and actually building it. If you're going, I don't know how I'm going to do that, there's always a solution. There's always a bigger fish, as Qui-Gon Jinn once said. So let's talk a little bit about the MOC itself, other than the custom part. It's a very simple frame. We can kind of see an Anika torso there through the armor pieces there, I believe, unless I'm looking at that wrong. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. I'm not a doctor. I don't know. But something I really like about that, you can, of course, see that the arms are a little bit more simple, so at least I've got that right, maybe. And that's something I kind of wanted to touch upon. Shadow Gear often refers to, he loves to have like a desk toy. Like he'll buy an action figure of, I don't know, say Spider-Man or something. And it'll just sort of be on his desk, and, when he's on a loading screen on a video game, or, I don't know, something's taking a bit, he'll pick up the toy, pose it, play with it for a sec, put it down, and then keep going. Or as he's thinking about something, play with it and stuff. And I think that's really cool, is to make a MOC that is superposable, and just to have it on your desk, play around with it, put it in some fun poses every so often, and yeah, it's just a fun little toy, And I think the fact that this MOC is a more sort of simple frame like that really lends itself to being a desk toy, and really lends itself to being, more posable. Because if you make something that's less complex and just uses specific, it's literally just got some pre-Bionicle limbs, that isn't I'm going to say custom again, but I don't mean custom. When I say custom, I mean brick-built version of a standard Bionicle limb. I don't mean custom as in he's edited it or something. But yeah, I think that is always a good way to sort of look at something, is to decide whether or not you want something to be just pure CCBS bones or pure Bionicle limbs or whatever. Because if you do that, it's going to be a lot easier to pose, and you can get it in, you can have a bit more fun with it for that matter. So that's really cool. That's awesome. Anyway, that is about it for the MOCs in this episode. Thank you very much to the three talented builders. If you want to see more of their stuff and check out those guys, give them a follow and stuff like that, please check the links in the description where you can find their MOCs. Also, be sure to check the links in the description to find my social media, because that is the best way you can submit some of your MOCs to the Bionicle Inspiration Series. Just head on over to my Instagram, Flickr, Facebook, any of that stuff. Send me a personal message with a link or photos, some stuff like that, and I will add it to the list. That's about it, guys. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next episode. Happy building. Bye for now.